So I'm trying to exercise a new reflex today by taking an idea that I was going to tweet out in a Twitter thread as a knee-jerk response to something else that I read and adapting it into a video. Because as I keep trying to hammer home to you, but mostly to me, I'm a content creator now. Something so spur of the moment and disposable as a tweet has the potential to be fashioned into something a bit more digestible and artsy. Mountain. Moon. Void. Stars. Glasses. 70s hair. Minimalist attire of 2-block colors. These aesthetic choices can be described as art in some shape or form. And yet, the takeaway message is, I have a think. It agrees with some people and disagrees with others. Here you go. So what am I talking about today? I am talking about the breaking story that Martin Scorsese, director of Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, the upcoming Irishman, a dude who I've kind of filleted, more or less, in my last 2 uploads, and I'll probably go out of my way to talk about something that doesn't entail him in some shape or form for whatever I post next. In an interview with Empire magazine, and I'm learning this through IGN because I'm trash, he said the following in regards to the MCU. I don't see them. I tried, but that's not cinema. Honestly, the closest I can think of them, as well made as they are, with actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is theme parks. It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being. I like to think that got a little better as I went along. Okay, so my feelings on this. Marty's pushing 80. He's been around forever, and his contributions to his art form just completely dwarf any boomer or cringy or memey take he could have on something as hot button as the MCU. I keep saying hot button in regards to comic book movies. I think I seriously need to reevaluate my priorities. But on top of this, historically, he's also been pretty progressive when it comes to other things that, would be subject to retaliation of any kind. I completely botched my execution of this point the first time around, so here we go again. It goes without saying that a lot of the guy's movies have pushed the envelope of what you can show in a movie: violence, sexuality, grittiness in various cityscapes. But on top of paving the way with his own aesthetic and style, he's also an admirer of films from all over the world and has an organization that tracks down gems and preserves the original negative and repackages and presents it in a way that normies such as myself would find appealing. In fact, just a few months ago, I saw one of what many people consider the greatest Filipino films ever made, Manila and the Claws of Light, which has a new restoration that was provided by that very organization. He's also been a very vocal supporter of the digital revolution, encouraging up-and-coming filmmakers to use the various tools that have come out in the last couple decades, and not to pay attention to the frivolous and superficial tendencies of the industry itself.
The communal experience is always important. You can make a film on a camera the size of that doorknob and still show it to 1,600 people in an audience. It's still a great communal experience. And whether we like it or not, we have to deal with new technology, high definition, or digital, whatever it's called.
Couple that with the fact that The Irishman is going to Netflix, a company that's recently under fire from other big directors like Steven Spielberg for trying to hone in on the Oscar action. Not that I care about that. Watch my last couple Oscar videos to get a summation of my value of the Oscars. I've ascended beyond the golden statues to a land of pure enlightenment and acceptance of all forms of art. Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is you're not going to get everything right every time, and we should just appreciate when you are on the right side so that when you're no longer on the right side of the conversation, you can be forgiven. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So my biggest beef, if the criteria for what makes something true cinema is something as vague as trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being, well, the Marvel movies definitely do that. At least to a degree that's very similar to other movies churned out by a super corporation, like blockbusters, thrillers, rom-coms. Stuff that isn't necessarily high art can still have that kind of effect on the audience that's watching it, even if it's not as potent as like a French art house film from the 60s or Citizen Kane. Like, movies of all shapes and forms touch on human truths on a more psychological degree, rather than a direct one, like Chris Nolan style, where they're verbally pointing out what the point of the movie is and the philosophical musings that Nolan is getting at.
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Like, movies of all varieties and casts and tiers inspire people for different reasons. Like, if I were to ask Quentin Tarantino if he considered Texas Chainsaw Massacre or, like, I don't know, Coffy or any macaroni combat or spaghetti westerns that aren't by Sergio Leone were considered cinema, he'd probably say yes. And I'd be inclined to agree with him. Cinema is storytelling told visually through cinematic techniques, and regardless of how much poetry you could spew about the messages being brought forth with the creative choices, at the end of the day, you're still watching a movie. I feel like these barriers of cinema in bold letters, it's like more unnecessary boomer gatekeeping. Keep in mind, I'm not saying that the Marvel movies are as good as, like, you know, any critically acclaimed darlings that rack up a lot of awards or make it onto a lot of top 10 lists, as arbitrary as those are. Like, between Apocalypse Now and even, like, Iron Man 1, for a lot of people's money, one of the best, if not the best, movies to come out of the Marvel studio. The last 30 minutes of Apocalypse Now alone are better than like 90% of the movies I've seen throughout my life. So as much as I adore Iron Man, as much as I am in love with RDJ's interpretation of Tony Stark, as funny and real and as visceral as that film is, there's no contest. But I would consider them both to be cinema. To get a little more broad, and something you should know about me is that I am all kinds of chaotic evil when it comes to what counts and doesn't count as art. Sunday newspaper comics are art. Comic books from, like, the 80s that were sexually charged and really exploitative are art. Rothko paintings are art. Statues of soldiers squatting and squeezing their lemon are art. I'd go as far to say that that example is, like, pretty high art, because I think it's making a pretty provocative statement on our relationship with the military and how they squat and shit in the woods like any of us would. Just a thought.
Using this Dutch angle as shot, and by keeping the book in focus, I can make a statement about how consumerism and the junkie culture of capitalism is obscuring my head, seen here, from making direct contact with the book, and how we're losing contact with the creatives within our own soul. Thank you. This has been art.
Kids doodling stuff or making a sculpture out of macaroni is art. Video essays are art. YouTube poops are art. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I'd say that they're even artier than, like, most other types of content that get popular on the platform. Hey ho, what about music? I like music. Yoko Ono and her crazy-ass shouty music is art. Really cerebral, you would have to study years and years of theory to understand why it's impressive jazz is art. A theoretical album where a dude goes into a soundproof studio at his high school, takes a shit into a tuba, and then posts it on Bandcamp would be art. Like, I had a few years of my life where I just very outwardly didn't consider the more grotesque and torture-heavy movies that I know are out there to be art. Like, how could something that's meant to go out of its way and disturb the audience and upset them and evoke a lot of unpleasant feelings from them, how could that be considered art? Well, because if that was the intention of the artist and they managed to do that, regardless of whether or not I like it or if I find that to be a worthwhile thing to try to do, it's a bit of an accomplishment to pull it off, either way.
I actually have a lot of different emotions I want an audience to feel. There's funny stuff in there, I want them to be able to laugh. There's exciting stuff in there, I want them to have the fun of the adventure. Horrific stuff in there, and I want them to feel that pain. There's suspense sequences, I want them to be on the edge of their seat. There's cathartic violence sequences, I want them to feel the catharsis.
Eli Roth, Hostel? I think it's trash. I don't think it's nearly as subversive and smart as a lot of people make it out to be, or any of its immediate influences that I'm not gonna bother watching, because I physically can't watch it. Like, it upsets me to that degree. I do that with something as basic as Walking Dead. which is way more sensational and way more exploitative than these artier looks into the darkness of the human psyche are.
You are torn open. I am bigger. I am better. And I got a better.
But it's art. It just is. The more important conversation to have, bar, do I personally like it or dislike it? Because we're all entitled to those feelings. That's how art works. Do I consider it good? And can I articulate why I feel that way with valid points? I think the conversation of what is and isn't art is a dead end because we all come from different backgrounds, we all have different values, we all have different sociological lenses that are going to make different works appeal to us in different ways and resonate with us in different ways. Pink guy running around shouting nonsense means way more to people than any silent experimental film from Scandinavia, And that's okay. That's 100% okay. It's all art. That's my thought anyway. Anyway, thanks for watching. I was able to say more about that than I thought I would without any writing of any kind. This could very well end up being an episode that I send off to somebody else to edit. I won't, with whatever I post before this, to act as models for how to make it look and feel. I'm editing this. We'll see if I do it. We'll see if this stays in. Maybe the editor will keep it in. Maybe they'll do something really goofy right here.
There's some dogs over there.
And that's the end of it. I'm gonna leave the screen so that there's room for clickables. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll see you in the next video. This was straightforward.
You forgot to tell him to subscribe.